ABC made the announcement Kimmel would indeed be taken off the air indefinitely. And this is just the latest chapter in Donald Trump's ongoing campaign to crack down on free speech, dominate the media, and essentially render the First Amendment meaningless. So it was for the journeyman cable news host Tucker Carlson, just fired from his third network. He believed he could say anything, no matter how vile, no matter how disgusting, no matter how offensive, no matter how dehumanizing or belittling. And if you act like a sociopath over and over and over and over, you will become unpopular on the national stage. That's just like a basic principle. Over time, probably not going to work out well for you in the long run. Eventually, people will be rightly offended, disgusted by it.
Oh, wait, they're still going? Oh, they are. Okay, well then, ladies and gentlemen, 24 hours later, the hysterical Democrat Party is still endlessly whining and complaining and screeching about the Jimmy Kimmel suspension, and it is getting more unhinged by the moment. We now have multiple elected Democrat politicians actually comparing the situation to Nazi Germany, and that's not me taking it out of context or referring to dog whistles. No, they are quite literally saying this, and we are even seeing some House Democrats beginning to lay the legal framework for another failed impeachment attempt of Donald Trump. That's right. They actually are trying to push to impeach him off of how dare you get Jimmy Kimmel fired. And here we have yet another example of them always taking the worst political hills to die on, right? Defending violent criminal illegal aliens, defending MS-13, defending men in women's sports, and many other such ridiculous positions. That's not enough. Let's also make sure the world knows that we as a political party actually think that Jimmy Kimmel is funny or a comedian. But let's be completely real about this. Despite all of the about Jimmy Kimmel, it's not that serious. Like, it's really not that deep that an irrelevant, mediocre late night host is getting taken off the air. And even the most hysterical Democrats deep down believe that. You know, yesterday we talked about how J.B. Pritzker was comparing the situation actually to the Holocaust, like he literally said that. Even he doesn't believe that out of his own words. We know what this is really about, which is the reason they're making such a big deal out of this irrelevant guy is because of the fact it is a massive diversion tactic to distract you from the fact that just a week ago, a radical leftist shot Charlie Kirk. That's what this is about, right? So they don't care if they're going to get repeatedly debunked on these arguments of the FCC and what public broadcasting licenses mean and why the argument of free speech or the First Amendment does not even apply here. They don't care if, you know, in the end, people don't care that much about Jimmy Kimmel. Anything to get our minds off of the fact that one of their radical activists just did that, murdered one of ours, and then furthermore, all the Democrat Party did was make excuses for it and repeatedly refuse to actually do something about stopping the radicalism on their own side. That's why they're doing all this ridiculous behavior. And so let's just remember that. But that said, I still, in today's video, would like to show you some of this ridiculous behavior because it frankly is kind of comical. So we'll talk about it. First, though, do us a favor if you enjoy our content. Make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate it. And with that said, okay, so you can go watch yesterday's video for Pritzker's comment. It's toward the end. But to show you yet again, you know, I'm not trying to insinuate that the Democrats are we're comparing Jimmy Kimmel to like a Nazi purge. They're actually saying that. Here you have from Representative Eric Swalwell saying, quote, in 1934, Germany passed a law making it a crime to tell jokes or laugh at its leaders. We can't go down that road. That's what happened, right? Again, an irrelevant comedian who was already on the chopping block. He already was hemorrhaging money. It was going to happen. Screws up because he blatantly violated existing FCC rules, which, by the way, were written by Democrats. I'd like to further explain that later in the video. This is just like, guys, when the Nazis made it illegal to joke about Hitler. Now, keep in mind, this is the same political party that expects you to have amnesia over the fact that they spent the past 10 years trying to censor social media. They even banned Donald Trump on it for about 2.5 years. But guys, you know, literally Eric Swalwell says this, right? Because what's next is you can't post what you want on social media. Oh, really, Eric Swalwell? Really? That would be a horrible thing. I cannot possibly imagine that, right? Imagine the horror of being censored on social media. You know exactly what's happening right now is, again, they expect you to not remember. They expect you to have amnesia for the past 10 years. But now that the shoe is on the other foot, and by the way, it's not even a equal retaliation. Okay, it's about a fourth, frankly, of what the Democrats did to us during COVID, post-Jan 6, even pre-Jan 6. Now they're saying the right wing might censor social media. That's evil. We believe in free speech, guy. We always believed in free speech, right? Only when their back's against the wall do they say that. Okay. Disingenuous. Screw them. We shouldn't even listen to that. But anyways, and you can't text your friends anything that might upset the government. Really? Because I can think of some times when... Okay, let's just keep reading. That's not the way it should be. The people shouldn't be afraid of the government. The government should be afraid of the people. Isn't that literally the Second Amendment argument that Eric Swalwell calls great? They're so shameless, okay? Needless to say. But anyways, there you have it. This is the type of nonsense you are seeing. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier, you are seeing right now the House Oversight Committee and others trying to start that process of, hey, maybe if we win the House in 2026, this is one of many avenues we can take to impeach Donald Trump. And that is exactly what Oversight Ranking Democrat Robert Garcia announced today. He is launching a House investigation into the Trump administration, ABC, and Sinclair after Jimmy Kimmel was pulled off the air. And, you know, this is talking about ongoing efforts to censor opposition to the president of the United States, blah, blah, blah here. And you can see as well, Eric Swalwell, the same exact clown who showed up to Congress today wearing a stupid looking Jimmy Kimmel hat, basically threatened that openly, right? He says, there's going to be a Democrat majority in just over a year. To the FCC chairperson and anyone involved in these dirty deals, get a lawyer and save your records because you're going to be in this room answering questions. Yes, indeed. That is what they're trying to set up for you.
So I want to make it clear. There's going to be a Democratic majority in just over a year. And to the FCC chairperson and anyone involved in these dirty deals, get a lawyer and save your records because you're going to be in this room and you're going to be answering questions about the deals that you struck and who benefited and what the cost was to the American people because that happened.
You know, I'm going to take a really wild guess here. The Democrats are about to trip over themselves on this issue. Like, it's not going to end well. Because what's inevitably going to happen is that Swalwell and Garcia and all of these self-absorbed politicians are going to go on their media tour because they can't avoid the attention. And eventually, somewhere along the line, after enough right-wingers online raise the criticism, one of these news hosts is going to ask the very basic question. So where were you when Joe Biden censored social media? Right, when he directed the FBI to basically go and threaten Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Twitter, and Zuckerberg has since admitted openly that's happened. Elon Musk said the same exact thing. And they're not going to have an answer to that question, right? They're just relying on the fact that voters have really short memories. The problem is the internet does exist. People can go back in time much more easily now. And that's the same exact problem that Barack Obama was ruthlessly mocked for today after he tried to make ridiculous claims like this, saying, quote, "When I was president in the aftermath of tragedies, my response was not to go after my political opponents," right? Obama never weaponized government. Biden never weaponized government. It's like, do you just think we're that stupid? I don't know, take a listen.
When I was president, in the aftermath of tragedies, when Dylan Roof went into a black church and, based on his own words, shot a group of folks who were engaged in Bible study and who had invited him in. And according to him, it was for racist reasons. As President of the United States, my response was not, who may have influenced this troubled young man to engage in that kind of violence, and now let me go after my political opponents and use that.
Yeah, fact check and casual reminder. The Obama administration's IRS was caught targeting conservative groups. And it's not a conspiracy theory because, as is reported by NBC News, the IRS had to come out and formally apologize for it. Here's an old headline, but still true. The Associated Press reports the Internal Revenue Service says it gave extra scrutiny to organizations with the names Tea Party or Patriot seeking tax-exempt status, and they have apologized for inappropriately flagging conservative political groups for additional reviews during the 2012 election to see if they were violating their tax-exempt status, which, by the way, you could argue had a big impact on that election because they were delaying the way you could process donations, delaying if you could get legally filed, etc., etc. But again, these people are that shameless. And you can also see, I mean, here's just the protest today, apparently. And it's just pathetic as usual. So, you know, this is what we're dealing with. As I've been saying, the short bus, that is the Democrat Party, truly.
ABC, grow a spine! 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 ABC, grow a spine!
Well, I have to say, credit is due where it's due. It is truly impressive to see that every single Jimmy Kimmel fan in the entire United States showed up into one place to protest. I mean, good for them. Totally not staged, totally not astroturfed, by the way. I want you to look at these signs, right? They all link to refusefascism.org. Now, I don't know if this group is nationwide or not, but I will tell you, having grown up in LA, these people were always everywhere, right? They're on the campuses, they're at every single rally. I believe, if I'm not even mistaken, they might be tied to like a communist party or something like that. But long story short, right, you always see these signs, they're always linking there, they're always wearing shirts like this, right? Revolution, nothing less, okay? These people are paid organized protesters, so just keep that in mind. Now, there's many examples that I can't catch. I can tell you this right now for certain, okay? And if you go and watch street videos, for instance, of like conservative people going to protests in Los Angeles, you will always see this. So isn't that just so hilarious? Like, even in this moment, where Trump is talking about cracking down and doing RICO charges against the organized left and declaring Antifa a terrorist organization and looking into the fact that the entire so-called left-wing grassroots is astroturfed and being propped up by George Soros money, etc., even the people who show up to protest on behalf of Jimmy Kimmel are astroturfed paid communist agitators, literally. So, you know, there you have it. Now, moving on further into this scandal, I want to show you now what the Democrats are having a meltdown over, because apparently Trump uttered some new statements today in regards to the firing of Jimmy Kimmel that just proves this is it right here, right? This was government overreach. They coerced ABC to take him off the air. You know, he is violating his power and all that. And, well, let's take a listen to the statements and then we'll respond.
Look, that's something that should be talked about for licensing too. When you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump, that's all they do. If you go back, I guess they haven't had a conservative on in years or something, somebody said. But when you go back and you take a look, all they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that. They're an arm of the Democrat Party. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, so what you just heard has essentially now become the Democrats' rallying cry, right? See, that's the smoking gun. He said it. It was a collusion scheme with the FCC. It's an attack on the First Amendment. It's an attack on free speech. He needs to be impeached for this. It was heavily authoritarian, etc., etc. And again, that quote reads, when you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump, they're licensed. They're not allowed to do that. Except there's one problem. Now, if you don't understand the context or you haven't listened to us explain this issue over and over again, then I could fully understand how it sounds authoritarian. And that's hence why Democrats are trying to weaponize people's ignorance. But the problem here is that, ladies and gentlemen, in this statement, Donald Trump is 100% correct. As we have explained time and time again, but will briefly here do once more, ABC News does not, and by the way, specifically the syndicates, the distributors of ABC News, do not have the same free speech rights as you or I. See, they keep crying First Amendment, but they have absolutely no idea how this works. So just to repeat here really briefly, ABC, CBS, and NBC, those original networks before you even had cable television, receive from the FCC what is called a public broadcasting license. In other words, it is free. They do not have to pay for their airtime. They have a special relationship and a special benefit from the government. And part of that contract does state that there are certain rules when it comes to fairness, but furthermore, they have to overall operate within the public interest, which means, in other words, knowing that, for instance, right, it's no different than, you know, if you receive a government grant and the government says, okay, there's certain guidelines to, you know, spending this money. You can't just do whatever you want with it. Or when a federal worker, for instance, is at work, they're not allowed to wear a MAGA hat or a Kamala hat because, hey, is that a violation of the First Amendment? No, when you have special contracts here with the government, there are rules that you have to follow. So again, they're crying free speech when they don't understand the issue of free speech that's actually at hand here, right? I've explained this a lot. Let me allow someone else to do it. So here's Molly Hemingway in her own words. People need to be honest that Kimmel is out because distributors were fleeing his show. Also true. The distributors are not state actors, but private actors. Tell the truth. And let's also be clear about this. Kimmel did not lose his First Amendment rights when these private distributors fled his show, leading to its end on ABC. He is able to find a different market to peddle his lies, disinformation, and hatred. This is true. He just simply is not allowed to do it with a government-backed and subsidized public broadcasting license that few people or even few TV channels in this country have the privilege to hold. Right? Because even the cable networks, including Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they don't have this special privilege, nor do they have to follow the special rules that come with the responsibility. But again, ABC here does. And, you know, to me, it's truly astonishing that I'm 22 years old. Okay, I basically grew up in the era where TV was on its way out. And yet even I know about the FCC. Like, this is what liberals, when you really break it down, are so shocked to find out. Oh, you know, the same rules that apply to everyone else apply to us. So essentially all that again happened here is the Trump FCC threatened to enforce its existing rules that were enacted by federal law that Congress passed. And suddenly, when the FCC says, hey, if you don't get your act together, then we're going to enforce the rules against you. The Democrats are like, they're going to enforce the rules? See, this is proof. The government colluded to take down Jimmy Kimmel simply by saying you broke the rules. We might enforce them unless you don't do something about it. So it's like, yes, like, did FCC pressure absolutely probably help in taking down Jimmy Kimmel? Absolutely. But you know why that is? Because number one, Jimmy Kimmel was an easy target considering the fact that ABC was trying to get rid of him anyway, let's be honest. But also number two, because they actually broke the rules. Right? Why do you think ABC didn't go to court? If the Trump administration was so in the wrong here, well, they didn't go to court for two reasons. Number one, they didn't think Jimmy Kimmel was worth it because he sucks. He's not funny. He's not a comedian. But secondly, why? Because likely they were not to actually win the case. Okay? So here, let's have this explanation go on. One of the biggest prizes from the government is an extraordinarily rare license to broadcast on the public spectrum. That is correct. That is what ABC does. We're not talking about cable. We're not talking about the internet, which, by the way, disregarding the fact that they're different, Joe Biden actually did try to censor. No, we're talking about public airwaves, right? Which are, of course, regulated by the FCC. I again say, I am 22 years old. It is shocking to me that people older than myself don't know the FCC. They're pretending like it's never happened before where the FCC stepped in and said, hey, there's issues with what you're showing on television. I didn't grow up in that era. I've only heard stories about it, but even I'm fully aware. Oh, the FCC can enforce rules. Oh, it's a regulatory body that's existed for almost 100 years. It's not some new thing that the Trump administration invented or made up. But as you'll kind of find out, they're really just mad the FCC is being used against them. But anyways, if you win that prize, you make gobs of money and get to influence public opinion. However, within those rules, that Democrats would really learn a lot from if they were capable of reading. Broadcasters are required to serve the public interest and not knowingly air false information to their audiences. Again, not because of the First Amendment, but because their networks are receiving a special privilege and a special benefit from the government. The things here are different, right? Even though ABC and other left-wing networks have been allowed to violate that regulation brazenly for decades, a mere investigation here is proper. And it turns out it wasn't even necessary because ABC just said, yeah, yank them. We don't even want them anyway. And furthermore, if you're curious specifically as to what those rules actually are, you could actually make the argument that Kimmel violated several rules when it comes to public interest. But specifically, in regards to the infamous clip itself, let's talk about FCC Rule 47 CFR 73 1217 on broadcast hoaxes. Oh, so what you mean to tell me is that when you're on public airwaves, you don't just have total free speech, right? The First Amendment and your rights there don't apply. They do apply to you as a private citizen, but when you're on public airwaves that are essentially sponsored by the government, it works differently. And we're being lectured, by the way, on free speech by the same exact people that think you should actually go to jail for saying quote unquote hate speech or hateful things in your own personal capacity. But no, we should be allowed to run as much liberal state propaganda as we want and to say, hey, you cannot run liberal state propaganda backed by tax dollars, essentially. That's an attack on free speech, guys. Okay, let's read the rules then, since they want to claim these don't exist, right? Broadcast hoaxes. No licensee or permittee of any broadcast station shall broadcast false information concerning a crime or catastrophe if, number one, the licensee knows this information is false. Seems to me Jimmy Kimmel knew better. Okay. But even if people want to say, he was insinuating, he wasn't saying it directly. Okay, let's read though number two. It is foreseeable that the broadcast of the information will cause substantial public harm. Strike two, buddy, right? And number three, broadcast of the information does in fact directly cause substantial public harm. Any programming accompanied by this disclaimer will be presumed to not pose foreseeable harm, etc., except for the fact that they did not put any type of disclaimer for it. Jimmy Kimmel has not come out and retracted those statements or whatever. So again, what they're so mad about, the big collusion scheme here, is the FCC simply said, we're going to enforce our rules that you have to actually follow. What? You can't do that? That's an attack on the First Amendment. No, it is not. No, it is not. Okay? Dinguses. It's just so ridiculous. These people. All right? Again, they'd be really upset about this if they could read. But of course, they are not able to. Here, by the way, was the official response of the FCC commissioner, if you're curious, explaining this very issue. So take a listen.
Yeah, broadcasters are different than any other form of communication, including here, we're on cable right now. Fox News doesn't have an FCC license. CNN doesn't. But ABC, CBS, NBC, those broadcast stations do. And with that license comes a unique obligation to operate in the public interest. And over the years, the FCC walked away from enforcing that public interest obligation. I don't think we're better off as a country for it. But look, President Trump ran directly at these legacy broadcast outlets, and he exposed them to these market forces. And a lot of these affiliate groups said, to your point, we're tired of carrying this stuff. Late night shows, something's gone seriously awry there. They went from going for applause, from laugh lines to applause lines. They went from being court jesters that would make fun of everybody in power to being court clerics and enforcing a very narrow political ideology. And Nextstarr, as you noted, stood up and said, look, we have the license and we don't want to run this anymore. We don't think it serves the interests of our community. Sinclair did the same thing. So there's more work to go, but I'm very glad to see that America's broadcasters are standing up to serve the interests of their community. We don't just have this progressive foie gras coming out from New York and Hollywood.
It's just so exhausting. Do you think I enjoy this, guys? I mean, seriously, do you think I enjoy having to sit here and explain the same information in the same FCC rules and litigate the same exact issue over and over and over again in front of stubborn people who can't read, can't listen, can't anything. They're just like, free speech, right? But what is the overall point we are continuing to make here? When Donald Trump said they're licensed, they're not allowed to do that, he was correct. He's literally telling you the truth. He's saying it in Trump fashion, but yes, according to FCC guidelines, when and if you are licensed, you are indeed not allowed to do that. So here's the thing, as much as we're making it this narrative of, oh, well, you did it with Biden, so Trump is doing it back, they're not actually the same thing. Because it's one thing for the Biden administration just randomly say, hey, censor social media. What law is mandating us to do that? I don't know, just do it, or else maybe we'll threaten you with something, right? It's a totally different thing for the Trump administration to simply enforce the law. They're not actually the same issue. And what all this is an introduction of liberals being utterly shocked when conservatives fight back with like 1/4 to 1/5 of what they've been doing to us. Now they're crying, bloody murder. Now they're, no, you can't do that. It's so mean. This is fascism, guys. It's just drives me freaking crazy, right? So, again, they're mad that we're enforcing the rules. Because why? Because you're dealing with a bunch of people who have the mindset of toddlers. That is liberals in America. That is Democrats in many regards, right? They're shocked that the rules apply to them. They think it shouldn't, right? No, why should I have to go to bed at night? Right? Of course, similarly, everything bad that happens is like someone else's fault, right? It must be the billionaire's fault or the white privilege or the oppressors or the colonialists, whatever, right? And of course, right, anytime they don't get something they want, they should just be allowed to take it by force, right? These are all things that you're supposed to teach out of people when they're children, but of course, we know who we're dealing with here. So that explains many things. Like it explains Tyler Robinson. It explains this left-wing shock at the FCC enforcing federal law. How dare they do that, right? And it just explains how these people think. And by the way, why you can show something like this to their face. Hey, buddy, when we said Jimmy Kimmel broke FCC rules, here's the FCC rule. They literally just close their eyes like children and go, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. What is wrong with them? I don't know. But just understand, we're dealing here with a bunch of overgrown children. And that explains so much, okay? But here's the other interesting thing. Let us remember, too, what was the Trump threat against the ABC network by the FCC? It was that if you don't follow through, we might revoke your public broadcasting license. As we've previously explained in all of our videos, but, I'm now kind of drawing this conclusion off of it, that would have actually allowed ABC to have more free speech. See, that's the great irony. Because if you revoke the public license and they go to private cable like everyone else, then they'd have way more leeway to basically just like say whatever they want. They don't have to worry about this public interest stuff or the fairness doctrines or, things about spreading certain lies or whatever. Like, there's just a lot more freedom of speech. So essentially, again, the Trump administration cracked down. It was this violent threat. They literally said, if you no longer want to follow the public interest and hence the public airwaves rules, that's fine. You can keep your free speech, just go to private. The left got really mad about this and said, how dare you say that ABC should be allowed to have more free speech if they want to go private? It's like, what? What? We weren't even talking about throwing anyone in jail. We were literally saying, you want to play by everyone else's rules? Okay, go play by everyone else's rules. This is Nazism, guys. This is the Holocaust. This is just what we're dealing with here, guys. So, essentially, guys, there you have it. I'm so tired of this issue. I mean, I apologize if this video is a little incoherent or all over the place, but I'm exhausted and these people are just driving me insane because it's the same thing over. We have to keep talking about the same irrelevant guy that nobody cares about. I mean, at least he's relevant. This is the most important Jimmy Kimmel has been in like a decade, but okay. Anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Like and subscribe and peace.